atheist. I'm pretty sure it's anetheist, isn't it? Anetheist? Hi guys and welcome to my channel. My name's Nicole and here on We Mama I do lots of motherhood, lifestyle, cleaning and organisational videos. So if you like that kind of content, I would love it if you could stick around and maybe consider subscribing. Today's video, as you can tell by the title, is going to be my baby daughter Nina birth story. Nina is now coming up to 2 months old and I thought I would get a move on and my birth story. So Nina was born on the 8th of August 2020 and she was born at 36 weeks. If you can hear snuffling and grunting, that is because she is at my feet. She's very clingy and she doesn't want to be far from me. So yeah, she's down in her Moses basket right next to me. So I did end up having a C-section with Nina. With my first child, I've also got a little boy called Didier. There is 21 months between them both. I had a normal birth with Didier. I was induced with him and he was a day early and I also had to have an episiotomy with him. But with her it was a very different story which I will get into, but I did end up having a C-section. So on that note, I will get straight into it. It all started on the 6th of August. I had family members staying with me. They are from Australia and they were staying with me because we live just on the very edge of the Cotswolds. So it's about a 20-minute drive to most of the beautiful Cotswolds villages around us. So that day we just went down the road to a place called Castle Coombe, but we had to be back at 3 o'clock because I had a scan. So I went straight in and I had my scan and they said that the baby was doing well, she was okay. But they did have concerns that she was a little bit on the smaller side. So they were measuring her and then they found out that she had gone back into a breech position. Now I think it was at 32 weeks. We found that she was oblique, turning to the breech position, which means that her feet are at the bottom and her head is at the top. Of course, she's supposed to be the other way around. She's supposed to be head at the bottom, feet at the top. She was in the breech position. Then at my 34-week scan, they said that she had turned around. So she was head down and feet up. And I asked if there was any way that she could turn around and they said probably not, it's unlikely. And then lo and behold, at my 36-week scan, she had turned back around again. And the reason that I had so many scans, I had to go every 2 weeks from 30 weeks because they were worried about her growth, which is one of the main reasons why I ended up having a C-section. So once the scan had finished, I then had to go and meet with a consultant. As soon as I sat down, she said, "Oh, baby's not growing as well as we would like." Before we could even get into any kind of conversation, she basically said, "I've booked you in for a C-section straight away. Can you pack your bags and go straight to the hospital?" And I just remember being in disbelief, like, what, now? And I remember just laughing because I just couldn't kind of digest what she'd said. She basically said, "Yeah, I think that's the best thing to do right now. Can you just go straight away?" So I remember calling my husband to come and pick me up because he'd gone back to the house with my family members. And yeah, I had to basically finish off packing my hospital bag. But yeah, then we basically had to wait for my family members to leave and I had to wait for my mum to come down and look after my little boy. So we then drove to the hospital and we didn't get there until about 6:30, 7 o'clock to the hospital. And of course, this is all during COVID. At this point, my husband dropped me off at the doors to the antenatal ward. There were 3 other girls in there, but as soon as I kind of arrived, the midwives put the curtain around me and they sat me down and basically just said, "We're prepping you for your C-section tomorrow." As soon as they put the curtains around me and the midwives went, I had a proper wobble. I had a real good cry in bed because my husband wasn't there. I'd just left my little boy. I was very scared of having surgery and it was just, you know, that sense of just being alone. So I then had to have steroid injection. After I had my wobble, I did get chatting to some of the girls on the ward and they did scare me actually. They were like, "Oh, the injection's really horrible, you have to have it in your bum and it really, really hurts." They said that's worse than the C-section. So I was like, great, can't wait for that. Then a nurse came around and she prepped me. She gave me some stockings, which were really sexy. And they're for the circulation, so they came all the way up my legs. They were great. And I had to have an MRSA test and also a COVID test. So after I had all those swabs and tests, she came in and gave me my steroid injection. I had to flip over and show her my bum cheek, and she had to jab me with that. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it was. I hate needles. I'm a big baby. I just hate them. These other girls kind of hyped it up a bit and they were like, "Yeah, no, it's horrible. They really hurt." And it wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. So yeah, the night went on and then in the morning, I had to have my other jab, which is at 10:35. At this point we were waiting for the doctors. The midwives on the ward couldn't tell me anything. They just said you need to wait for the doctors to see when you're ready to go into surgery. Then I remember going downstairs, and because I think I was up at around 7 o'clock in the morning, I remember going downstairs to meet my mum and my little boy, which was so lovely to see. They only stayed around an hour because of COVID, so I just saw my little boy for about an hour, and then I had to go back into the ward. Then they came in, they gave me more of the circulation stockings and also a gown, so I had to put that on the side ready for when I got called into an operation. And they also put me on a monitor. By this point I was just watching Friends, reading books, and I got to meet my husband at around 1:30. I was only allowed to meet him again downstairs. He was not allowed on the ward. Then at 3 o'clock the doctors came in and basically said, it's not going to happen today, I'm not going to have my surgery. So I basically got bumped and I had to wait till the next day to hear any news. So that was horrible because it was just, you're just waiting around all day, and I just wanted to cry because at this point I just wanted to meet my baby. It was horrible. I also forgot to mention, but the night before I also had to take a tablet, some kind of tablet. I can't remember what it was for. Stabilizing tablet maybe, I'm not sure, but I had to take that the night before, and I also had to take it in the morning. Then at 8 o'clock I was told to basically be nil by mouth. I also had to do this the day before as well, but yeah, 8 o'clock I was told no fluids or food, and at 10:30 I was given the pill again, and this is where it kind of just escalated. At 10:30 they came in and gave me the pill and said, we don't know when you're going to be able to go in and have the surgery. And then 15 minutes later, the doctor came in and said, right, get in your gown, you're going downstairs. So I remember freaking out, packing my bag, to go from saying, you know, we don't know when, to then coming in 15 minutes later and saying, you need to go. That was interesting. So I had to quickly scoop everything up into my bag, and they said, basically, get into your gown, you're ready to go. So at 11:45, I remember contacting my husband saying, you need to come here right now. I didn't get a chance to see my little boy that day, so I was really upset. I really wanted to see him before I had the operation, but obviously I couldn't. And then I had taken my bag to one of the waiting rooms. My husband was here at this point, and we were just waiting for the anaesthetist. Anaesthetist? I'm pretty sure it's anaesthetist, isn't it? For the anesthesiologist? Basically the person who does the anaesthetic. I can never say these medical terms. So while we're waiting for the anesthesiologist, I can't say it. The surgeon came in and had a word with me and just explained the procedure, and they also had to get me back on the monitor. And when they put me on the monitor and they gave me a quick scan just to see where baby's position, she had turned around again. So she wasn't breech anymore, so they had to go back out and consult and basically say, come back in and say, this is your choice. Because she's not breech, we don't have to give you a C-section, we can induce you. But at this point I was just ready to go, and I just wanted out. I just wanted my baby out. Of course, at this point we didn't know it was a girl. We did opt for a surprise. It was really lovely at this point. I was so nervous. I remember having a bit of lavender and a flannel and just trying to calm myself down that way. They were really lovely. The hospital was fantastic, so much different to the first hospital that I gave birth in. They came in, and all the doctors and the people in the room came in and they introduced themselves, and they were just so lovely. But yeah, at this point I really thought, oh my god, if I don't need to have a C-section, they're not going to let me have the C-section. So I basically went from not wanting a C-section and doing anything to prevent a C-section to saying, get this baby out of me right now. Then, yeah, it was go time. My husband had to go into a separate room and be gowned up whilst I went into the theatre room. I think I was in the theatre for about 1 o'clock, and basically I had to go in, I had to sit down on the bed. I remember it being really cold, and I was freezing. So I remember already being really tensed up, and by this point my heart was going, and I was really like frightened. I was not relaxed at all. I just remember I remember crying. I remember not really remember crying, but I remember having just tears pouring down my face and being like, I'm fine. It was horrible. And then they prepped me for a spinal block, and they were so lovely. They came and held my hand. But yeah, I remember them putting that in, and it was really like a sharp, horrible scratch in my back, and it wasn't very nice. And the worst thing is that my husband still wasn't allowed into the room at this point. I think if he had been there to hold my hand, even though the nurses were holding my hand, they were so lovely, it just wasn't the same. If my husband had been allowed to be there to hold my hand, I think I would have been a lot calmer. But because I had to go through all of that on my own, it was hard to do. So he wasn't allowed in until I was actually lying down. And the worst part is that by this point I had to lie down on the bed. They flipped my gown up and they basically put like a screen in front of you with your gown over it so that you can't see down. So you are basically naked from your boobs all the way down to your toes, which was fun. And of course, you know, you have no dignity when you're about to have a baby, so everything is on display. And then they come over to me, this is real chat, they come over to me with a razor and be like, oh, we have to give you a little trim just so we can get to baby. So I was like, yeah, fantastic, do what you need to do. And you know, obviously it's a mix, it's not just ladies in there, it's men, male surgeons, and you're just like, oh God, all my bits are on display. And then I just have to remind myself that, you know, these aren't the first lady yard. This isn't the first lady yard that these people are seeing. Just get over it. Then my legs went dead and they had to obviously like tap me and prep me just to make sure that I couldn't feel anything. And then my husband was allowed in and I just remember being on the bed and I just sobbed as soon as I saw him. I was so nervous. And they put the catheter in me and I just remember them going like boom, boom, boom. It was so fast. And all I could feel was just tugging down in my belly. At one point then, I just remember feeling very, very sick. I was like, I'm going to throw up. And the nurse was like, yeah, that's completely normal. And she shoved a bowl in my face. I just remember like everything in my head, feeling like I was just rolling about. I was just like, ugh, feeling like I was going to throw up. Luckily I didn't. So yeah, it all happened very fast. And then all of a sudden they just came like gathered around me and just said, now we need to push on your lungs, so don't be alarmed, but that's what we need to do. And yeah, they just pushed down on like my rib cage and we heard a cry and my baby came out. And I just remember looking up and they were holding up my baby and she was so beautiful. And my husband went round to see her and he came and told me and he said, we've got a little girl. And it was so magical. It was 1:40 by this point and she was absolutely beautiful. Then they wrapped her up and my husband went to go and cut the cord, as he did with my first little boy. And yeah, then they wrapped her up in a little burrito and they popped her on my chest. And it was so lovely as they just went to town fixing me back down there. So yeah, she was so noisy. She was very grunty and she was very vocal. And then at this point, my husband had to take her away into the recovery area whilst they finished sewing me back up, which was horrible because once again I'm left on my own. Then I had to basically be moved onto another bed, one of the wheelie beds, and they rolled me into the recovery area with my husband and with our little newborn girl Nina. So in the recovery room I then had to have a lot of blood pressure checks. They tried to put Nina straight onto my boob to breastfeed and she wouldn't quite latch on straight away. She was so small, she was 5 pounds 1. And I think her mouth was just a bit too small to kind of latch on. It was quite difficult. And then they kind of noticed as she was trying to latch that she was making some funny noises. And this is where it just got really, really hard. She was starting to get very distressed because she couldn't latch. Then I had to use, I can't remember the name for it. What are they called? The little injection things. Little tube. My mind has gone blank. Anyway. We had to use one of those to express the milk and some colostrum. Once she'd had the colostrum, she didn't stop grunting and they were very concerned about this. And she basically got taken straight to NICU and I didn't see her. That was heartbreaking. It was really distressing because at this point then my husband was told to go. He had to leave. He was told that he had to come back to NICU in about an hour or so that he could see her. And I was basically told to go back upstairs and rest. And I didn't get to see my baby. I didn't get to hold her again. It was horrible. So Matt wasn't allowed to go back in until 4 o'clock. So I had her at 1:40 and yeah, he wasn't allowed back into the hospital until 4 o'clock. I remember being upstairs and just in a bit of a mess at this point. I remember going for food because I was starving. I was so hungry and just lying in my bed reading my book and just feeling very empty. Literally, I had no baby and I had no one there with me. It was just a very, very horrible time. It was a bit of a struggle, with this whole COVID situation. It wasn't very nice. At this point I still had my catheter in and I had to change my have pads because you bleed a lot even though you have a C-section. So when my husband was in NICU, we just kept up to date on the phone and FaceTiming, and she was in an incubator, bless her, and she was covered in tubes. It was such a horrible, horrible sight. And they said that she had very low oxygen levels. That's why she was grunting. And she also had a lot of fluid. So when babies are birthed naturally, when they go out through of the vaginal canal, they push out all of this fluid, but obviously that doesn't happen when they have a C-section, so they have to try and get rid of all of that fluid, and she was really struggling to do that. So yeah, that's one of the other reasons why she was in there. And by this point, nobody came in to see me, and I just remember they just really wanted to leave me rest. Then at about 8:20, a nurse came in, and I was just sobbing in my bed, and I was like, I haven't seen my baby since I gave birth to her. She's down in NICU, I've been up here, and I just really want to go downstairs and see my baby and my husband. And she was like, oh, of course you can. And she got me into a wheelchair, and she got me down to NICU, and I got to see my baby for the second time, which was horrible because with my first baby, he was put straight onto my chest. He didn't leave my side, whereas, as soon as I had Nina, she was just whisked off, and I didn't see her for a good 4 or 5 hours. And then a nurse came in, and they saw me like holding her hand through the incubator, and even though she had like tubes in her nose, she had an oxygen mask on, they said, do you want to hold her? So I remember getting to sit down in a chair and then putting her on me, and oh, it was just such an emotional time. So then I think at around 10:30, I basically had to go back up. I was very uncomfortable in the chair, and I had to go back up to my ward, on the postnatal ward, and I was given my own private room. I basically had to have a sponge bath, and I remember just sobbing the night away really, and watching Friends, trying to take my mind off it. Then the next morning I had to have a lot more painkillers, and at 9 o'clock I went straight back downstairs to see her, and I just remember sobbing. I think it then kind of really hit me that I'd had my baby and I couldn't really hold her and be with her. So I remember just sobbing downstairs with my husband because he was there as well. But once again, the NICU staff were really lovely. They said they weren't really worried about her. It is kind of common, and she's doing really well, and they weren't really worried about her because she was born at 36 plus 1 day, and they said, she's not that early, if she's not that premature, it is kind of common. And they said, yeah, she is doing really well, but she just has a little trouble getting the oxygen in. So by this point we just would stay all day in the NICU. I had to keep going back upstairs because my back, due to the spinal block, I was in a lot of pain from that. It was just very achy and I couldn't get comfortable. So I would leave my husband for a few hours, go back upstairs and rest, come back downstairs and be with him that way. And I didn't get to see my little boy that day, so I went a Saturday and Sunday without seeing him, and it was really, really hard. Then first thing, Monday morning, I got to see him. So I got to see him for about an hour in the hospital lobby at the Costa Cafe, so that was really nice. I got to see my little boy finally. So I always found that really hard that I couldn't see either of my babies. I really struggled with that. Then for Nina, I expressed the colostrum with a few syringes. My milk really was started to come in, and I did really, really well. So I was using lots of syringes at first, and then I think the next day I started using the espresso machine, and I think I got about 30 ounces at first in each bottle, and then I started double pumping as the days went on, and I was getting probably about 100 ounces out of each boob, which was pretty good. So also at this point I had to, because I was staying in hospital still, I had to have a bladder scan, which is apparently routine after having a C-section, to make sure that your bladder is still working. I couldn't really feel myself having wheeze, and they were like, for number 2s, that's not going to happen for a while yet, which is all wonderful to talk about. And the other thing that I had to have was the injection called Clexane, I think it is, and it's basically like an aspirin, like a blood thinner, and you have to inject it into your stomach. So I had to have this when I went home as well. It was horrible, and that injection is worse than steroids because it stings. Like, the injection doesn't hurt too much, but then the fluid, like the medicine in that syringe, it circulates your stomach, it stings so much. Then by Wednesday, Nina was doing really well. She came off of the oxygen and she was put into an incubator in a separate room, so that was really good to hear. We just basically spent the whole time downstairs holding her and letting her sleep. I was starting to breastfeed her, which was really, really good, but she was also still had to be tube fed, so we were just alternating that. Then on Wednesday at 10:30, I had the best news. We were being moved onto the TCU unit. So after not being with her since Saturday, on the Wednesday I was finally going to be able to share a ward with her. So we got put into the ward, she was finally out of the incubators, everything was good, and then she had signs of jaundice. So she had to be put back into the incubator. So that was horrible, but she was, at this point, she was next to me in bed. So I had my bed and the incubator next to me. And this was a bit traumatic, a bit emotional, because they had to put a mask over her eyes and basically put her into an incubator in the blue light overnight. And I remember getting really upset and really getting really traumatized over it, and they were like, she's absolutely fine, but she just looked like she was in like a blue cooker. It was horrible. Then on Thursday she was out of the incubator by about 12 o'clock, and they said that she was fine, she might have to go back into it, but they didn't think she would after her blood tests came back. She was doing so well with boob feeding at this point, with breastfeeding. She had taken to it like a trooper, and she had stopped the tube feeding, which was horrible. I hated watching that, like the whole tube feeding. It wasn't very nice to watch. So by this point she then had to be tested for jaundice again and then weighed, and this was on the Friday. So on Friday they weighed her and she had put on a good amount of weight, and because I think they have the birth weight, they lose a bit of the birth weight, then they put more weight on. So she had done that, she had done really well. She'd had her ears checked and her jaundice results had come back and she was absolutely fine. And then, yeah, by 3 o'clock, we were told that we could go home. So my husband came to get me and we all went home. It was the most emotional, traumatic week. I think if I had just had the C-section and gone home, it would have been fine. I really built up the having a C-section, getting really upset and worried over that for absolutely no reason at all. But the most traumatic part was my daughter being in NICU. I have given it kind of a watered down version just to keep this video quite short and sweet. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think this is going to be a bit of a long video. But I watched a few C-section videos, but yeah, I just want to explain that the C-section, even though I was really worried about it, it wasn't that bad. And the most traumatic part was my daughter being in NICU, even though she was absolutely fine. Like I said, they said that they weren't worried about her. It was horrible because I couldn't hold either of my babies, and of course being in hospital with COVID, it just didn't help. So yeah, that is pretty much my daughter's birth story. I need to kind of wrap it up because I think my little boy is waking up upstairs, so I'm really sorry if the ending to this is quite rushed, but I just wanted to document my daughter's birth story. I did vlog the whole time that I was in hospital, so I'll link that down below. I will also link her first update as well. She's doing absolutely well. She's putting on so much weight, and I'm so proud that we've done 8 weeks of breastfeeding because I only lasted for 2 weeks with my first. And yeah, she is doing so well. I hope this video helped in some way. If you are about to have a C-section, it really isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's just uncomfortable and not very nice. I am healing very well from it, and I'm very lucky that I haven't had any kind of infection. I hope it does help in some way. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!